Good morning, friends. Welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. As you could probably tell by the thumbnail and the title, this is about NPCs. This is about new NPC techniques I'm developing that are going to really blow the roof off most things. Like, I have to say that I'm trying out some new techniques with NPCs, and in my Darkest Dawn campaign, these techniques are just having massive impact. I'm going to describe two different techniques I'm using to take NPCs to just a whole nother level, a whole nother layer of complexity, just really adding a whole lot with two very simple strategies. And I'm going to outline these strategies for you. And as I say in my rather dramatic thumbnail and title, you may never run NPCs the same way again. Friends, I've been playing for over 20 years, and I am probably not going to ever run NPCs the same way again, because I jumped into this campaign sort of planning out these NPCs with a sort of trial test. Like, maybe if I really lay into these things, it'll make it better. And boy, has it made it better. These NPCs are so, I feel like, alive and living. Shout out to my Darkest Dawn players. There might be some spoilers here, so you maybe shouldn't watch. But I also want to give a shout out to anyone who's thinking about jumping into the Darkest Dawn campaign. Right now, I have another game opening on Thursday mornings. I still need 2 players for my Monday night game. So if you think you might want to play in a game with me, link to my Start Playing Games profile is in the description, and you can check that out. But in the meantime, I want to describe 2 different techniques I'm using to run these NPCs. So now let's talk about the first NPC, which is Cynthia. Okay. Now, at first, as with most NPCs, I didn't really know if Cynthia was going to get any interest from the players. She falls into the stereotype of what I call like dark, moody female characters, okay? I like to run this. This is a trope in my games. Generally, once in a while, I'll throw this out there. So it's basically like a dark, moody, kind of like attractive girl, female character. Generally, this character will be sort of morally complicated and even ethically complicated. A lot of times they'll have like trauma, and they'll project that onto the world with sort of like, really, like, I would say extreme behaviors. And then the variety of those behaviors is kind of like the spice for those characters. And so I've had them take many different forms. I've had them be spellcasters in the past. I've had them be rogues, had them be assassins, different things. But this particular character is a spellcaster, and she fits into this trope very nicely. However, the way I introduced her was she was kind of on the run from these elven soldiers. And then the elven soldiers came looking for her at the tavern, and she appealed kind of for help. And one of the player characters did kind of take pity on her and kind of help her escape from the inn, like helped her sneak out. It turned out she wasn't very sneaky, and she did actually kind of need the help. And then she started kind of following the party along. They ended up going out the back, ended up in a graveyard, had a fight with some demons, and then it was a bit of a bonding experience. And then she was like, well, I'm coming with you now. And there's a lot of backstory, but to be really honest, the backstory stuff isn't so different from any NPC you might design. Like, I've talked a lot about this on my channel, but what I want to talk about is what I did differently with this NPC, which is once I realized that the player characters were buying into her, they were interested, like she was generating some interest, I thought to myself, okay, this is an NPC that the players are interested in, so now I'm going to invest some time into her. So now that's also not so different from usual, but let me tell you what is different from usual with this character. So with this NPC, I went straight to, like, basically I would call it one centralized belief manifested in an extreme way. One central belief manifested in an extreme way. And that's what I started with this NPC. I mean, I started actually technically with just dark, foreboding, emo, female character in a dark cloak in the corner of the tavern, right? So it's like a trope, yes, but she wasn't fleshed out from the inside out in that moment. I didn't start thinking about what was under the surface until I saw that there was player character buy-in. Why? Because sometimes NPCs are a dime a dozen. You might run 24 NPCs through the scope of your game, and the player characters don't care, or maybe they kill them, or maybe they rob them, right? Or they make enemies out of them, whatever. Even if they make enemies out of them, if they show interest, that's when you start developing them. At least that's my technique. And I might have a little bit of an idea, but I don't really invest a whole lot of thought process into these characters beyond just like presenting them at surface level. But then once the buy-in starts, we go down that road of fleshing out from the inside out what kind of person this is, okay? So one core belief expressed, projected in an extreme way onto the world. So what is hers? So here's the thing about this girl, Cynthia. She has this core belief that life, like the state of being alive, is bothersomely unsustainable. And it actually bothers her. So it bothers her in a deep, unsettling sense. Almost like why do we bother like trying to make this stay a thing? Since everything's going to end up dead anyway, shouldn't we just go ahead and accept it, right? Now, this is the central core driving force of this character. I make for the most part, I make all of my NPCs one-dimensional. And I make them one-dimensional because they're not going to get much screen time, because the screen time belongs to the player characters, unless the player characters choose to interact with the NPC. I always try to make my player characters the center of the spotlight. So there's not going to be like a bunch of scenes where this non-player character is going to be like divulging the deepest philosophies that they believe in this complex way. So it's like one core belief for NPCs. That's what we go with. Okay, one core belief. So this is her core belief. Now, how is it manifested to the world? Now, this is the funny part. And I just kind of moved here by product of like thinking through her innermost philosophies about this, about life, and how life is inherently unsustainable to a bothersome degree. That's actually important. So she's fascinated with death. She's fascinated with corpses. She's fascinated with undeath. She's fascinated with the way worms and maggots process the decaying flesh. She is like really obsessed with the idea of what it would be like to be undead. And then also she's obsessed with the idea about interacting with undead. To her, there's a beauty in what she would call the pure form of existence, which is actually a state of decay and breaking down. And to her, things like the worms and the maggots and the vermin are actually almost like transcendent life forms with true purpose. Not like humanoids who are running around casting spells and engaging in petty drama that's not even going to last their lifetime. She's deeply enthralled with the beauty of this vermin dissecting things and having it just decay back to the dust level, which to her seems like the most sustainable way to exist. So when I, role play her character, now she's also got some she's kind of got a sharp wit. She kind of makes fun of people and she pokes fun at them. Her sense of humor isn't incredibly dark or anything like that, but there are moments when this comes out, right? So she was fascinated by the graveyard. She's like, isn't this a wonderful place? It's like, why would she think this is a wonderful place? She would think it's a wonderful place because to her, all these corpses down in the soil, this is right. This is where everything is going. This is a place that is telling the truth about our existence. This is like the most emotionally comfortable place she's been in a long time. A room full of elves and humans who are alive and talking. To her, it almost seems like this is so exhausting because it's all just finite drama that doesn't actually mean anything. But once they die, that's when the real beauty of existence begins. That's when the worms find the bodies, and that's when they start to crawl in, and that's when the maggots start to break down the flesh. And as the flesh decays, there might be mold and fungus and mushrooms, and the matter will break down. And to her, this is the true essence of existence. This is the essence of life. And when I say life, she would probably use that word much differently than most beings would. So this manifests itself in her basically moving toward that philosophy in kind of like conventional, socially, dare I say this, normal ways. So she talks about it and she kind of gives little hints into her philosophy when people are talking to her. And, when she thinks about it, there's one of the player characters is wrapped in bandages and, looks a bit like a leper. And she's like, are you really a leper or are you faking it? She just joking around. But then she also kind of made a comment. She was like, well, leper, you've already got one foot in the grave. Have you ever glimpsed what it would be like on the other side? What if the disease takes you? Have you thought about that? And if so, how do you feel about it? In a way, she found it so interesting that this character, if they were a leper, was so close to that side. Their body's already falling apart. So to her, that was one of the most interesting things going on in her frame of vision. Why? Because it's that much closer to her core belief. So this is what we're talking about. Core belief and then you project it onto the world in an extreme manner, right? So before I dive into NPC number 2, I just want to remind you that we have a community, a Discord community, free one for game masters. Our goal here at GM Philosophy is to empower game masters to run better games. And if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you should join us in the Discord. It's free, links in the description. You can't go wrong. Bounce in and say hi. We would love to have you. We are over 500 game masters strong at this point, so it's a great community, lots of conversations, lots of bouncing ideas back and forth, sharing homebrew stuff, whatever. So feel free to dive in and join us there. Now let's talk about NPC number 2, Sir Sebastian Teller of the Church of Justicar. Okay, when I first introduced this character, I honestly thought he was going to die, like right away, so I did not really flesh him out very seriously. But he does kind of fit into a trope that I also love to put into my games, which is a young, proud NPC who thinks they're really good at something, but they haven't really encountered extreme danger in the world. They do not have a dark background. They, generally tend to come from a noble background or somewhere where they've been pumped up, sort of like to an arrogant status without really deserving it, without much experience. They believe and think they kind of know everything. And they also have this really bright sense of honor usually. So a lot of times I'll run paladins or knights kind of this way. And basically they will think that they have it all figured out. They'll be even evangelistic about their ideas, but then if they travel at all with the party, they will quickly realize that they're in way over their head and have no concept of the real world. I love that trope, and I have played many such NPCs like that through my games. So this character kind of fits into that trope. So here's what happens. When the group is in the graveyard and Cynthia is talking about, the graves, she's actually talking with one of the player characters, having a conversation about that, and he's trying to kind of talk her into basically leaving him alone. We have this character walk in kind of whistling. He has his sword and his shield with the symbol of Justicar, the scales of justice on his shield. And he walks in and basically says, "Oh, I wasn't expecting anyone here. Hey, I just need to let all of you know, my priest has sent me to this graveyard telling me there's going to be an incident here, and I've been sent to save this town from danger. So if you can all please just exit the graveyard and let me deal with this threat, I'll keep you safe. But I really need all of you civilians to evacuate the premises because it's about to get very dangerous." Like, so this is what he says, right? He's trying to get. So, and these player characters are like looking at each other, like, what the heck is going on here? So he kind of proceeds to like lace up his boobs, and he's getting ready for like a battle. And he's like 17 years old, right? So they roll a few insight checks and this and that. They start talking to him, figure out he's basically like so the equivalent of kind of like a junior in high school, but he goes to like a religious, like church-based university for students where he's basically learning to be an emissary of the Church of Justicar. So it's like the equivalent of like a Christian high school, but he's like goes to this preppy religious high school type thing. And he starts talking about how he's gotten badges for swordsmanship and knot tying and doing his 5-mile run and armor proficiency. And they're like looking at each other. He's talking like he's a Boy Scout, like he's literally acting like a Boy Scout, but he's like so serious. He's going to save this graveyard from grave danger, save the city from the dangers going to happen in the graveyard, or the little township. They're in a little town called Hummerstead. But anyway, so what ends up happening is they're talking to him and they're starting to think, well, why you? So they ask him like, why you? You seem awfully young. And he was like, oh yeah, well, the Great War, which in the Darkest Dawn, basically there's a big war that's going on in the north. And a lot of the armies went up there, but the armies of Amaranthine, which is like the civilized city along the coast, just got defeated by the barbarian tribes in the north. There's like a bunch of mysteries. Like, well, how did this happen? What's going on? So he was like, all of our knights of the church, they've gone north on crusades to like help the refugees and help fight and help with healing and this and that. So since, our numbers are a little low around here, the priest sent me here because, I'm at the top of my class basically. And I'm here to protect this township from the danger because my priest got a vision. So they're like, what? What is going on here? But he reiterates, well, I really appreciate the conversation, but you citizens better evacuate because things are about to get dangerous. And I'm going to have to, basically do some church-based butt kicking here. And I'm going to ask you to leave so that you don't get hurt by collateral damage. And then they're trying to tell him, like, you should probably leave. Because, like, one of the main characters has, like, the soldier background, and he actually fought in the war in the North. So he, like, rolled some checks, and he realizes this kid is just, like, green. So he's probably going to get himself killed, right? So he's like, you should probably get out of here. But then a portal opens in the middle of the graveyard, and these demons start climbing out. And it's like, oh, my God. So this kid Sebastian, he goes charging up and he's fighting the demons, and the others are fighting. And, so basically what happens is they help to defeat the demons. And the way they actually defeat the demons is actually one of the player characters casts sleep, and almost all the demons fail their rolls, including the main demon who was like controlling the like horde of smaller demons. And when the main demon fell back into the portal, because they were having to climb their way out of the portal, so the players got kind of like a surprise round on them because they weren't out of the portal yet. So whenever the main demon fell asleep and fell back into the portal, all the others got drugged back in and the portal closed. It like thwarted the plan, right? And then it didn't open back up. So it's probably like a one-time thing. Like he only had one portal or something. But anyway, Sebastian, he knows so little about the world that he thought, because the whole time he was fighting, he was like jabbing at the demons and then shouting, "In the name of Justicar, I command you, go back from whence you came." And he thinks that they actually listened to him. So he believes he just performed a miracle, sending these demons reeling back to the abyss from the power of his words, invoking his god, right? So this was what he thinks. So now he says to all of them, "Oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you see how they cowered at my words?" And they all like look at each other and they're like, "Does he?" And they were even rolling insight checks. They're like, "Is he joking or does he really think he did it?" So they roll, and it turns out no, he knows so little about the world that he didn't even realize that the one character was casting the spell, and he just didn't know. He had no concept of it because he's been so isolated in this little, church school. He's never seen anything go on in the real world. So he has no clue. He's so clueless. But he thinks that he did it. He also thinks it's a miracle. Then he tells all the characters, "Okay, listen, I know I was telling you before to go about your business, but you just witnessed a miracle in the name of Justicar. Plus, you helped me. I mean, as it turns out, I had it handled, but thank goodness, for that. But, had it gotten out of hand, you were there, and I appreciate that so much. You showed so much courage. So I'm going to request that you come back with me to my church so that you can report the eyewitness accounts to my priest. Eyewitness accounts are needed to confirm a miracle. If you could confirm this miracle for me, that would advance my career in the church so much." So basically he wants them to do that. But they're like, "No, we're going to go to Nabas, like the elven city down south." And then so now he doesn't want to leave them because he doesn't want to let his eyewitnesses to his miracle get out of sight. He wants them to come with him back to the church so they can verify his miracle. If they don't do that, he won't get credit for it. He'll just get credit for a successful mission, not for a full-fledged miracle. And he wants that miracle because he wants to be somebody. So now he's following them along every day, trying to persuade them to go back to the church with him. But he's following along with them because to him, that's like the most important thing in the world, is getting those eyewitness accounts. So that was really interesting. I never really planned on any of that happening. But now we come back to this thing. Core motivation projected into the world in an extreme way. This is the formula that I'm working with for the NPCs here. Okay. So what are Sebastian Teller's core motivations? Or rather I should say, which is the core motivation? Because, like I said before, one-dimensional. I run NPCs one-dimensionally because they're not the stars of the story. They shouldn't have this. They can have complexity, and sometimes that does emerge. But for the most part, strong interlayered complexity belongs to player characters. NPCs are one-dimensional. They're only supporting cast. So what is the core motivation of our friend Sebastian Teller? Here it is. He wants to be the best and the greatest knight / paladin of all time. It's that simple. Sometimes it's deep and dark. Sometimes it's philosophically terrifying. Sometimes it's very straightforward. And that's what it is for Sir Sebastian Teller. Now, what is the extreme way that this is projected out into the world through his actions? Well, the extreme way is this done is that he has no experience, but he has all of this belief pushing him. So he believes in these things and he just throws himself into situations that he's woefully underprepared for without even realizing he's woefully underprepared for them. Now, later on in the session, he actually almost gets into a fight with some elves because an elven guard shoots one of the player characters, and then he is like, "You're going to attack an unarmed man?" And he almost drew a sword and went after the elves, but he would have gotten diced up like seafood by these elves. And the one player who was with us, who's an elf, got in his way and stopped him and was like, "You're going to get us all killed, but you're especially going to get yourself killed. Put your sword away." Telling him to stand down, but that was a situation where he was just going to blindly throw himself into the fray because of this inner belief. And because this inner belief is not at all buffeted by wisdom or experience in the world, but he's slowly getting some of that as he's interacting with the player characters, because they're older, they're wiser, they're more experienced. So they can see his naivety. He can also learn from them if he would open his eyes and stop thinking he knows everything, which is slowly happening, but it's a very slow process. So anyway, that is basically what I'm doing with these NPCs, but I just want to remind you the two things I'm doing. Number one, I'm developing a core underlying belief that drives them. It's like the engine of their character. And then two, I'm deciding on how that is going to radically and extremely project itself into the world through their behavior. If you figure out and nail down those two things and then just use common sense for kind of playing out what that would look like, you are going to come up with some really incredible NPCs that are going to really engage your players, and they're going to be so much fun to role play. So we want to flesh these NPCs out from the inside out, starting with the core motivation. After you have the buy-in. Obviously, you may not want to do all that work for the dozens of NPCs that are just going to get murder hoboed or, overlooked by the group. But once you've got clarification that players care at all about an NPC, that's when we start that development, working from the inside out to develop that character. So we work on the motivation first, and then we worked on how it's projected, and that's going to get you some serious traction with your NPCs. All right. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. Empowering Game Masters to run better games is the mission here. Hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button, and I'll see you awesome people on the next one.